Hello friends, bienvenidos. My name is Jen, aka Jen Calo on social media, your local witchy friend and intuitive guide through the occult. As always, my lovely husband and co-host is David, aka Premier Pulls on social media.
Hi everyone, on today's episode, Jen explains speaking in tongues.
Welcome to the show, grab a chair, make yourself at home. Jen's got stories to share, you'll never feel alone.
Well, I hope everybody had a great 4th of July, America's birthday, right? Dead center in the middle of summer, and I hope everybody still has their fingers.
I know. Back it up, Terry.
I know. That's always my, PSA going into 4th of July. Have a good 4th of July. Make sure next time I see you, you have all your digits.
Yeah, definitely.
But also, fire hazard. Can I share a really quick story about 4th of July? Sorry, I know it's off topic, but when we were young, we were playing with fireworks, and I think it was around 4th of July. And it was I think some neighborhood kids or my cousins, and we ended up throwing a firework over a fence, and we didn't know they had dry bush, and it started a fire. So I think my cousin ran across you couldn't just jump the fence, you had to go all the way around, which was crazy. And he's like, hey, your yard's on fire. And the people ended up putting it out. And they were like, oh my gosh, thank you so much. They basically thought he was a hero, even though he was the one who threw the firework. Yeah. So all that to say is be very careful with fireworks. But
yeah. And if you're one of those people that lights fireworks outside of 4th of July, what's wrong with you?
Yeah, it's 4th of July and New Year's. A couple of days before and after, I'm okay. But then, if it's going into March for some reason and it's at 3 a.m, be considerate, you know?
Yeah, seriously.
You're going to have speaking in tongues.
I know.
All right, well, let's hear about today's episode. This is one that I've been wanting to do for a while. Funny enough, when we first started the podcast in 2023 we're in 2025. It hasn't been exactly 2 years, but obviously this year's going to hit 2 years. One of the big things we talked about was are we ever going to run out of topics to talk about? And back then we were well, we don't think so. So we literally sat down and wrote down, as many topic ideas that we could come up with. And I think we had a good 20 or 30. And, we're okay, that should at least get us started. So we're way past 30 episodes. We're getting closer to 100 episodes. But we haven't really referred to that list because we've had so much to talk about. We've integrated guests, and then we had, for most of 2024, we had the astrological symbols, and, we have our experience exchange, and now we have our spotlight series. So we have so much to talk about. It almost feels we're never going to run out of topics. But we were thinking of what we should do for this episode, and we just took a peek at that list, and we've covered a lot of them, but there's still quite a few gems in there. And one of them was this one, speaking in tongues, which I thought was very I thought it was a very interesting topic. I mean, obviously we thought it was interesting back then, but we've just had so much content that barely now, 2 years later, are we digging back through the archives and saying oh, these are a couple topics that we can talk about. And we still have probably a dozen topics on that list that we haven't even touched in 2 years because y'all are so wonderful, and especially everybody who's come on the show and taken the time to be a guest on our podcast and in our space. Really just filling that content. But all that to say, this is a little bit of an OG episode for us that I don't want to say it's unreleased because we never recorded it, but we're doing it for the first time, and I'm very curious to hear about this.
Yeah, I love, when I was researching this, I was this is why I love this podcast, because this is stuff that I find super interesting, but then I would have no one to talk about with.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm very excited. So have you ever heard about what speaking in tongues is by any chance?
So from my general understanding, it is when an individual has a capacity of speaking in what you could colloquially call gibberish that makes zero sense. Usually the understanding is that they're a spiritual vessel through which whether it be a spirit, a religion, a being is taking over through their body and then like speaking in a unknown or foreign language, which results in like quote unquote speaking in tongues is what I understand it to be.
Yeah, so it's a spiritual practice where a person utters words or sounds that are not a part of any known language.
Okay.
And it's a religious experience. AKA, it's also called glossolalia, which literally means speaking in tongues.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, very interesting. We mainly see this, or originally saw it, through Christianity. It's a Christian manifestation of the Holy Spirit, but it happens more in what's called charismatic Christianity, which is like the Pentecostal type folks or like other denominations where you can have more spirited religious experiences
Or practices, right?
because I know as a Catholic, heck no,
Yeah.
you're quiet, sit down, shut up, and feel guilty.
Well, there's those like Christian churches in the South that have venomous snakes in their service, and I don't know much about it, but my understanding is like God will protect them, and if God doesn't protect them and they get bitten, is because you're basically doing something you're not supposed to as a Christian. So I'm guessing it aligns kind of with that type of denomination and practice.
Yeah, very like charismatic, theatrical. But speaking in tongues is not new. It's quoted in the Bible like a lot. But two quotes that I chose are Acts 2:4, which says, all of them were filled with the Holy Spirit and began to speak other tongues as the Spirit enabled them, is one. And then the other one is, and these signs will accompany those who believe my name. They will drive out demons. They will speak in new tongues. And that's Mark 16:17. So what's very interesting is that you never speak in tongues alone. You always speak in tongues like with other people.
In a group. Like you're never praying in your bedroom and all of a sudden you start speaking in tongues, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or at least that's not a common phenomenon. Maybe some people do, never say never, but
I'm smiling because religion has so much theater in it, right? It can be so boisterous. We talked about our episode with the Millennial Saint, and we talked a lot about like the Catholic practices and how gaudy and campy it is. But I feel like a lot of religions have that, right? You go into like Orthodox like churches, and it's so ordained and like even stained glass, or like the beautiful mosques, and nothing against like the religions, but there's always some like theatrical component to it, right?
yeah, absolutely. It's very interesting. I'll talk about some stories later, but I was so happy to see that there was actually research done on this.
Oh, there was. Okay, awesome. I love the research.
Yeah. So in 1972, William Samarin, a linguist from University of Toronto, he listened to many hours of recordings of people speaking in tongues from all over the world. So a lot of like mass or church or just a lot of these celebrations are recorded,
Like spiritual gatherings.
These spiritual gatherings are recorded. So he listens to hours and hours of people, being taken over by the Holy Spirit, speaking in tongues. And he was trying to analyze, like, if this is the language of the Holy Spirit, then, and no one knows this language, then there should be commonalities. Just because you don't understand a language doesn't mean there isn't like pattern, order, grammatical things, syntax, etc. So he's like, it's like, decoding something. Like there has to be a pattern if I listen to it enough. But he listened to hours and hours and there was no pattern. So he kind of called it like a pseudo language, because if it was a true language from one source, which is the Holy Spirit, then it should have a pattern regardless of who it takes over, but it did not.
It kind of reminds me of there was this really super popular Italian pop song by Adriano Celentano. It essentially, it didn't have any words, but it sounded phonetically like English, and he kind of just did it to troll and show like people would dance to whatever. I guess back in the day, like English music was super popular, but it was pure gibberish, but it had like similar American sounds, and like it went huge and like viral because people were like, oh, like it's a good song, but they weren't saying anything.
It's very similar. This made me think of Simlish. You know,
Yes,
from The Sims.
The Sims, yes.
If you don't know what that is, The Sims is a video game, and the characters talk to each other, and they're like, Minorg, like they just start talking, and it doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
But it does kind of have a pattern. Like you could, like if they're happy or if they're pissed off, they'll make like similar sounds. Also, Animal Crossing,
yes.
where they're just like whatever.
Yes.
They also have their little like moments in how they speak, and then similarly, except they actually do have a real world word here and there, are the minions.
Yes, that's right. It's Spanish too, though.
So like Spanish and English, they throw like a word in here or there that like actually means something, but those are like pseudo languages I can think of.
Dialect and language is so interesting, right? And humans are programmed to recognize patterns. What's interesting with like language and communication, so much of it, it's not always the words, right? A good example of that is like between English and Italian, and Spanish and Italian, and even Spanish and Portuguese. You understand a lot of nuances, kind of inflections and similar sounds, and you can deduct a lot of like understanding even if you don't fully speak a language, right? So Italian and Spanish have a lot of the same root words, and so for example, I used to have a roommate that was like spoke Italian, and I couldn't really communicate with her in English, but I could communicate with her in Spanish, which was super interesting.
That is interesting.
And I know this is kind of becoming like a language lesson, but linguistics is very interesting to understand. And as we dive more into the speaking in tongues, I have a lot of like thoughts and opinions on it.
What I love more than one study or two studies, there was a follow-up study.
Great. Peer-reviewed and checked,
between 2004 and 2007. I see, but it's the same researcher, Heather Kavan. She did a speaking in tongues study between Pentecostals and a New Age yoga group called the Golden Light, who would also speak in tongues, except theirs wasn't necessarily tied to the Holy Spirit. It was more like once they reach enlightenment between meditations. But that's the same thing. You have like this pinnacle spiritual experience in both groups. What she saw were two very interesting things. With the Pentecostals, she saw context dependent glossolalia, and then with the New Age yoga people, she saw spontaneous glossolalia. So with the Pentecostals, like it wasn't like in the introduction when it was like, hi everybody, thanks for being here, that people would like all of a sudden break out into like speaking in tongues. It was during specific parts of the spiritual gathering or during a baptism that people would speak in tongues more, versus like in the meditation, because it's a little more like self-paced and everyone is just sort of like doing their own thing, even though it's in a group. But because of that, it was more spontaneous, and it wasn't necessarily like during a certain part. Some people would get it like earlier or later. So this is very interesting. At first, when I was thinking about this topic, I was thinking, mass hysteria. But then I actually looked up the definition of mass hysteria, and it's of unknown origin. And here, I don't think it's unknown. The context is like, for example, with the context-dependent glossolalia, it's certain parts of the ritual you're like, I feel like I have to do this because I've seen other people do it, consciously or subconsciously. And then with the meditation, because you're like reaching enlightenment or whatever, that sort of triggers like, now is the time to speak in tongues or this light language or whatever they called it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Maybe not mass hysteria, but definitely like mimicry, right? There's a lot of studies that show within like, communications and sociology, when we have a good connection with another person, like we'll imitate what they're doing. That can show several things. It can show that we're paying attention to what they're saying and kind of re-emphasizing their points. That way it shows clear communication. That's more conscious level, but also subconsciously, right? We tend to imitate people who are successful. We tend to imitate people who have exuberant personalities, because that kind of goes into like the primate brain of like, you know, that monkey is doing it and we need to do it too. But it's true, right? They're great apes that are social apes. So sometimes going against the group is more daunting and scary than just going with the flow, even though you know that like that could be a little bit crazy. Not super related, but kind of. There's like that famous monkey experiment with the bananas. Have you heard of that? Mm-mm. So there was like an experiment of a couple of monkeys, and they put some bananas on top of a ladder, and their natural instinct was like to go get the bananas. Well, what they did is like they had a couple monkeys as they were going up. The researchers would like punish them or make it so they couldn't get up, and like let's say they started going up the stairs or the ladder, they would introduce a punishment. So the monkeys like quickly learned like, hey, if you go up the ladder, even though there's like a prize up there, you're gonna get hurt. So with the first cohort, they all kind of learned that really quickly. Well, slowly what started happening is they would remove like a monkey or several monkeys from the little cohort and introduce new monkeys that had never seen the punishment, right? But what ended up happening was, as the new monkeys went to go see the banana, or go get the banana, the other monkeys who were from the previous cohort, they would actually stop them because they knew that like it was dangerous to get them. And then eventually they slowly removed all of the cohorts, and it was a whole new cohort. So it was all monkeys that had never seen a punishment of going up the ladder, but the groupthink was so strong that even though these monkeys had never experienced the punishment, none of them would go up the ladder, because they knew like that's not what you do.
Wow, that's fascinating.
Yeah, and I think all that to say, like, to me, and I'll get into it more, but to me, speaking in tongues is very comical. Like it's very cringy. I think it's one of the more cringiest things I've seen as far as like religious practices or spiritual practices. I always get the secondhand embarrassment. Like it's really strong when I see it. But if you're in that group, and you know, this is an experiment with the monkeys with the bananas, but once you're talking about like social constructs, including your community, your belief system, the people that support you, I think it would be a lot harder to go against it. So it's easier to like comply and, you know, quote unquote, do what your in-group is doing. And then I think eventually, like kind of same with the monkeys, the new people that come in just pick it up as a practice and say, this is kind of what you do. And to a certain extent can like believe it.
Yeah, that's so fascinating. And I think it's true. Like, people feel pressured to act a certain way or do things consciously or subconsciously. I read a book, I think it was called like The Girl with Seven Names or something like that. It was about a woman in North Korea who, she was a kindergarten teacher at the time, and one of the Kim Jongs died, and everyone had to like cry and mourn publicly. Like everyone got together and would like cry in front of the statue or in front of the grave or whatever, and the little kids had to do it as well. And there was a little kid that was crying so hard, she was worried that he was gonna get a seizure. She was like, what's going on? And when she like pulled him to the side, like, hey, are you all right? She saw that like, yeah, he basically spit on his hands and like rubbed it on his face, so it seemed like he would be crying. And he was just doing the most because his mom was like, if you want to be safe, like you have to really sell it that you're mourning the leader passing. So I thought that was very interesting. And me personally, like one time I went to like a Christian convention. It was Catholic, but it sort of had some like new agey techniques.
Vibe.
Yeah. And while I didn't speak in tongues, I think I did like yell or something like that. And I was really surprised because I was like, whoa, where did this come from? And I think subconsciously I was just like, this is what's expected of me because everyone is freaking out. So I also need to freak out.
You also get swept up in the moment, right? Mm-hmm. It's not one of those things that, unless you go in with kind of like a shitty attitude, and you're like, oh, fuck this, like, I'm not going to participate, which I've done, right? I think when you and I first met, you were still going to church, and, you know, you took me to this church that was very, like, hip and modern, and it looked like a concert, and, I would just go in, and because I was attempting to, like, get, to know you, and, you kind of do things where, you want to please your partner. I was like, this is so stupid. Like, I could not get behind it. And while the production was incredible, just like, to me, religion is so toxic, and there's just so many problems with it. And, like, I know this is gonna sound super bad, but, like, you can't, like, polish a turd, right? Like, you can add all the special effects, you can make it the most beautiful production out there, but, like, at the end, the core of, like, what religion is, to me, is something that's, like, just so bad for humanity that I was just in there, like, people are drinking the Kool-Aid.
Mm-hmm, yeah. I had a similar non-spiritual experience where I was like, why am I acting like this? But I went with my cousin to the Bad Bunny tour, Un Verano Sin Ti, and, like, I was excited to see him, but I was like, oh, I'm not gonna get, like, starstruck or anything. But then, if you know about that tour, back in, I want to say it was 2022.
It was 2022, yeah.
Yeah. He was basically, like, floating on an island, and we got, like, pretty close to front row tickets, and so the island was, like, directly above us. Like, Bad Bunny was literally, like, up there to me, and I didn't expect to freak out, but I was like, oh my god, Benito, like, I was, like, losing my shit, and I was like, why did I do that?
Yeah, because you get swept up in the moment.
Yeah, you get swept up in the moment.
Yeah. That's a very secular experience, but add religion to that, and it's scary, right? Like, religion and churches yield so much power because they've perfected the affinity of, like, over thousands of years how to wield that power. And some churches go to a lot of extremes, right? Like, the church that we went to was like, oh, everybody's welcome, everybody's super nice, you feel welcomed and you feel loved. But then there's some churches that are like, you're a piece of shit, you need to repent, and, like, this is where you need to do it. And both of them have such a powerful impact and such a powerful grasp on us as humans that, like, one can love you and you'll devote yourself, and one can hate you, and you think because, you need to repent or you need to pay a penance, like, you get swept up in that too, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'll talk about a little bit more of my experience at that secular conference thing. It was like a multi-day thing. Mm-hmm. There was another section where people were also passing out. Mm-hmm. And I think around then I had learned, like, CPR or something, so I was, like, hyper vigilant. And these girls, like, they passed out on top of each other. Like, one collapsed, and then the other collapsed on top of her, and the other collapsed, like, on top of her.
It's like a cascading effect.
Yeah, but they were, like, dogpiling, like, their body weight. They were crushing each other. And so even though I was, like, religious and swept up in the moment, I was still like, oh, they're gonna, like, die. They're crushing each other. Like, when people, like, stampede, or when there's, like, a lot of people in a very close proximity, like, the body weight crushing on each other is, like, what is most fatal sometimes. So
like in a fire, it's not always the fire that gets you, it's, like, the trampling.
So I was sorry,
no, go ahead.
So I was worried that these girls were gonna, like, hurt themselves because they were all, like, passing out on top of each other. So then I lifted one and I put her back on the chair, and she was kind of, like, slumped like that, and I put my finger under her nose to make sure, like, she was breathing. She seemed okay. And their, like, adult that was with them near me was like, leave them alone, they're with Jesus. And I remember I was pissed off because, again, like, I'm spiritual, but I'm also logical. I'm like, they're really going to be with Jesus if you don't let me make sure that they're breathing.
You're like, Jesus can't save you here.
Yeah, exactly. And he was like, you've got a point.
I don't, it's funny, I don't think I know about that. When did you do that? Obviously it wasn't when you and I were together.
No,
when did you
I was
do this?
in high school.
But, like, what year? Like, freshman and sophomore?
I think I was a junior. I want to say I was a junior.
Oh.
Junior or senior.
And this was while you were...
no, I was a junior. I remember
you were a junior.
Yeah.
And you went through... Because your parents... Did you all go to church together?
We did, and they were kind of strict, but I think I really pushed, and I was like, I want to go with my youth group to this. That eventually they were like, fine, like, it's through the Catholic Church, so we're gonna let you go.
It was like an overnight thing.
Yeah, it was at San Diego State University.
I used to know a lot of like Christians and youth group, and those Christian camps, man, those people get down on Christian camps for sure.
Wait, no, not San Diego State. There's like a private, there's UC San Diego State, and then there's a religious one. It was the religious one. What is it, University of San Diego?
Maybe University of San Diego?
Yeah, there's like a private
in San
religious
Francisco,
one.
the private one is University of San Francisco.
So then it's probably similar to University of San Diego, yeah.
Awesome. Well, I can't wait to hear a little bit more about speaking in tongues after this break.
Have you ever wanted to party like the Roaring 20s? Well, now you can. Abracadabra is hosting Sips and Spirits. Come learn about seance culture in the 20s, which were all the rage. They also shared ghost stories during the Roaring 20s. Come hear about local Merced ghosts. There will be hors d'oeuvres, drinks, of course, and each attendee gets their own spirit photography. So come check it out. I will also be providing tarot readings for my special event rate of $25. If you want to open yourself up in this spooky environment to any messages from the universe, but mention this ad and you get $5 off. Mention or reach out to Abracadabra on Facebook and Instagram to get your ticket today. All right, now back to the show.
So I want to talk a little bit about the examples where I've personally seen it, and we can kind of analyze those. So one of them is in the movie Jesus Camp. Have you seen that?
I have not.
Oh my gosh. It is such a good movie. It talks about, I believe it's like somewhere in the South or like middle America. It's this like almost extremist, but no, it's just very, with those like Southern Baptist religions where it's just a church, and then they send their kids to like quote unquote Jesus camp, like what you were talking about. It's like a summer Christian camp, but in the indoctrination is like you have to be warriors for Jesus. Like we're in a spiritual battle, a spiritual war, and they do a lot of like shaming on these kids. They talk about like if you watch Harry Potter, you're like the demon, or like again the tactic that I was talking about. But within that documentary, there is a section where like they're worshiping, they have their hands in the air, their kids are crying, like they're genuinely crying, and then they do start speaking in tongues. So it's a really good representation of that. That's one of the examples. The other big one that I think you and I may have grown up on together is the evangelical TV personalities, right? There's the Spanish ones, there's the English ones, and that kind of has the same tonality that you were talking about before the break about. It's these pastors who are healers, and like they'll touch you and then you'll be healed, or they'll hit you with their jacket and it'll knock you out. And what's really sad is a lot of people with ailments will go to them, and like that's the cliche of like he's cured now, like he can see or he can walk. Like they'll roll people up within like a wheelchair, and they'll like stand them up and say like, the power of Christ compels you to like get out of that wheelchair. But in those scenarios, there's a lot of speaking in tongues as well. Have you ever seen that, like the TV evangelical stuff?
I've seen it on TV. Mm-hmm. Like I've seen people speak in tongues in person, but it's been a little more like tame. Mm-hmm. But again, that was outside of like a true Catholic experience, which is why like it's so interesting that like what Catholics like aren't holy enough to speak in tongues. It just shows it's very like context driven, and it's not like, in my opinion, it's not actually the Holy Spirit possessing anybody.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then the third example is, like you said, that New Age. Now I do see, because whether it's against my will or like purposely, like somehow I'm in the community. I look at all like my friends on Instagram. They're all your friends. It's all like, I'm so surrounded by like witchy and occult things, and like I'm so opposite of all of that it's just like, it's crazy that that's what takes over my media feed. But I do see it now integrated in that, right? With like witches, or like social media witches saying like, oh, I'm being taken over by like a spirit, or like a spirit wants to communicate with you, and they'll go into the whole speaking tongues. Like, I don't know. It's
yeah, they'll call it light language. Every community is gonna have like its genuine like people that stand for something, and then maybe people that are less educated or straight up grifters. So the witchcraft community is not a monolith at all. But yeah, I've seen a lot of these like starseed, light language sort of people on Instagram where they're like possessed and taken over and like speaking in alien language. But honestly, like so much of that starseed crap is a ripoff of the Book of Revelations and Christianity, just coded into like a sci-fi bullshit package. And if you're like a starseed person, like a hardcore starseed person, and you want to have a conversation about why it's not bullshit, I'm always happy to listen to evidence and to the other side, but I'm also coming with receipts. And on the Patreon, we have on the Discord, the private Discord, we have a place called the Skeptic's Corner, where I always love to like show my deep dive on like specific concepts, and it's like, hey, this is why it's bullshit. Like I could show you the starseed context next to like the Book of Revelations, and it is literally copy paste. You just change out Jesus for aliens or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah, so like I've seen the lives, and to me where it gets super cringy, and again like that secondhand embarrassment is like they'll be having like a regular stream, and all of a sudden they'll be like, hold on, like I'm getting like this message, and like they'll be switching from English to tongues, and it's like theatrical, but it's like very bad acting, right? It almost looks like those, you know, B films of like Sharknado, where it's like the mouth doesn't align to what they're saying, and it's to me it's comical. And like, I hate to discredit it because you have a practice, right? You have an occult practice, so I would never sit here and say what you're doing is like bullshit or grifting or lying, because I think you're very straightforward with your practice, and you tell people like I don't know at all. You're never saying like I'm receiving messages from the other side. But these do seem a little grifty, like, right? Like, oh, hold on, I'm like getting a message, which I don't know. You might have some thoughts on that.
Yeah. I just feel like if you're like, I'm communicating with aliens, like, again, you're going to have some proof, but I feel like they always use it to become a moral authority.
Yeah.
To establish, like, dominance or to show, like, I'm better than you because I can communicate. So whenever it comes to, like, establishing dominance or I'm better than you is always where, like, my antennas are up and I'm like,
Your little alien antennas.
My little alien antennas are like, I don't know about this. Yeah.
So, or just the people that are like, well, I have like a sensitivity to the other world, like or it's like my burden to carry.
I'm an empath.
Yeah, it can get a little cringy. Okay, on the scientific basis of it, though, the three examples that I gave, one thing that I find super interesting, because I'm such a skeptic, like that's not going to faze me, right? So I do listen to how it's going, how it's working. One thing that's very interesting that if you notice it, the cadences are usually, I know you talked about like the different types, but the cadences which they're going is very similar. It's never slow, concrete speak, even if it's like nonsense. They're never going slow. It's always like a quick progression of speak, where their mouth is moving faster than their mind is processing it. And I think, and now this is my personal opinion and speculation, I think that it's because it's easier to fake, right? If you don't have to think about what you're saying, it's easier to speak quickly and loudly and still make it believable that you're experiencing something, as opposed to like doing it slowly and with purpose. We've never seen somebody speak in tongues slowly, right?
Orca Fortuna, Moon Pachupi.
Yeah.
You know, like if it's slow, like it's harder to sell versus like if you're like convulsing and like, you know,
exactly,
like,
the theatrics.
Yeah.
And a lot of people who like to draw attention to themselves usually speak louder and more quickly to convey a sense of like assertiveness.
It's like people when they're losing an argument, they'll just raise their voice, and it's like just because you're getting loud doesn't mean you're winning.
You're winning, exactly.
Yeah, very similar.
So that's the first part, right? It's always quick talk. The second part that I find very interesting is phonetically, the sounds that they use are always usually very native to the tongue they speak.
Of course.
You're never going to hear like an American Baptist, you know, Southern person speaking in tongues, throwing in the R sounds or the H sounds or the Ñ sounds, right? Like it's all very based on the capacity that they have to physically do it. So if they were actually speaking in tongues and taken over by a spirit, what a coincidence that it matches like their dialect, right? Or their intonation is the other one.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And then lastly, the last thing for me is they can never carry out full drawn out, I'm going to call them sentences, but at a certain point, there's a lot of repeating. So they'll say like a phrase, and at a certain point, when you can tell they've run out of like what to think, they'll just repeat that over and over and over. And it's just like, yeah, I mean, you don't know what else to say. You're kind of just caught up, and you're... To me, it's fake. I do think that there are people who get caught up in it, who believe in it and get swept up in the moment, like we talked about earlier, but I don't think it's like a real practice, right? Or a spirit taking you over.
It could feel like that because you're swept up in the moment and your emotions are like on such a high, but yeah, I think there's a lot that says otherwise.
Now, what would be very interesting, and I think this is mostly in like, I've seen it in like the exorcism films, is where somebody is taken over by, let's say, a demon or something, and then they're speaking another language. So like Italian or Latin, and then that, I think, doesn't hold much more ground for me because I'm still a skeptic, but to me, that's a little more interesting, right? Like somebody who doesn't maybe speak that language all of a sudden learns to speak that language. That I think would be more, at least entertaining to explore, you know?
Or what like William Samarin was looking for. He was like, okay, if it is a language, then at least there should be like consistencies. Like just looking for that, he was really trying to give it like the benefit of the doubt, which I commend. Like that's just science and scientific theory. But yeah, there was just no pattern at all. If it's a language, there should be a pattern. Or even like if there were like different like languages, like then he should be able to say like 33% of people like repeated this type of like light language or that type of light, and there was no, like you said, it was all based on like the sounds that you make in your native language and like, just, yeah, however people wanted to express themselves.
Yeah. So those are my 3 examples. What are some times that you've like seen people speaking in tongues, whether it's like in media or like in your personal life? I know you touched briefly on that retreat that you went to, but anything else you've seen?
Again, because I was raised Catholic, I didn't see like a whole lot of it, but
I do feel like Catholics have that stuff though. I think it's maybe more with like the exorcism stuff, right?
Yeah.
Like if a Catholic sees somebody speaking in tongues, they're calling their priest.
Yeah,
they're not like
they're
embracing.
Possessed. Yeah. So because I grew up Catholic, I didn't see a whole lot of it. However, I feel like as we started getting the internet and just like a little more easily globalized, like when I went to my youth retreat, it wasn't like traditional Catholic mass. It was definitely more like New Age Christianity mixed with Catholic teaching. So I feel like maybe nowadays, I mean, I haven't been to the church in years, but like I feel like maybe nowadays a lot of it is like mixing together with like what looks good and what catches people's attention. Well,
at the end of the day, right, all religion is a business, so that, you know, once people start leaving your business, you have to find a way to attract a new generation. So they have to adapt to the times, right?
Yeah.
But have you ever seen any like examples? Like I talked about that movie, and I talked about
yeah, I've seen it like with the mega church pastors and the weird like infomercials at 2 a.m. type of thing when you can't sleep. I've seen it there. Like I said, I saw it a little bit at that conference I went to. And I think that's it. Like YouTube, TikTok, like obviously.
Just things like that. Yeah. Excellent. Yeah, language is such an interesting concept, right? And it's interesting how we take it, run with it, and communicate with it. Yeah. What are your thoughts on, and this kind of touches a little bit, what are your thoughts on like spirits taking over? Because the speaking in tongues is the manifestation of a spiritual energy taking over for you. And I know I touched on people who are like, oh, wait, hold on, I'm getting like a spirit reading or a spirit message. But I have seen, or I have heard colloquially through you, that in some of your readings you talk about like, there's just this message I have to deliver. What's the distinction between getting taken over and then having like the spiritual intuition to deliver a message?
This is going to sound weird, but it's like, if your friend is telling you to tell your other friend something, like, hey, tell, so-and-so homie that didn't make it, like, that I said, what's up? They're not, like, crawling into your body to deliver the what's up, right? They're just, like, telling you, and you tell the other person. It's very similar when I receive, like, a message. But the thing is, this message isn't necessarily coming from, like, the aliens or anything. It's just, like, I'm able to connect with the person's energy directly to where, like, I have this, like, epiphany or this information to give them. Mm-hmm. It feels very similar. Like, if someone was like, oh, tell so-and-so that I send my best. It's just, like, very light. It's not, like, a whole, like, taking over sort of thing.
Putting you on the hot seat a little bit, so the difference between you getting a message and somebody who's speaking in tongues getting a message, would you say the only difference is the intensity of how that message is delivered?
No, I would say, like, I don't really get those unless, like, I'm using a tool. And I guess it's also context driven, right? Because, like...
Well, can we use the example of the time that you got a message to give your friend the red candle? Maybe let's tell people that example and then walk me through how you received that message. And I'm curious to see the delineation of that between somebody who's getting a message and starts speaking in tongues.
Okay, that was a very unusual situation. Let me give a normal situation. Okay. So, like, a normal situation is I'm doing a reading for someone, and then let's say a card came up. Let's say the Ace of Wands. Ace of Wands can mean a lot of things. It can mean, like, success with business. It could mean a new relationship. Like, it could mean a lot of things. But what happens every once in a while is that I get this feeling that this person needs to take care of themselves. And specifically with women, I get this feeling of, like, you haven't done your annual PAP. Or, like, you need to look and see if you have, like, PCOS or something. I'm not diagnosing anybody, but it's just, like, you've been avoiding going to the gynecologist. Like, I just get this, like, it feels like a message. Like, someone is telling me, like, hey, this person hasn't scheduled their annual PAP. And obviously, that's irresponsible. Not in a bad way, but it's just, like, as an adult, you
just
have
like a friendly reminder.
Friendly reminder, like, girl, you gotta do it. I know that they're uncomfortable and they're scary, but, like, it's part of your health. So it feels like someone's telling me, like, yeah, she hasn't gone to the gynecologist. Like, please remind her. And and I always feel weird because I'm like, what if I'm tripping? What if I'm, like, way off the mark and I'm talking to somebody about their genitals for no reason? But I say it anyway, right? And I'm like, listen, I apologize if this is weird, but this is just a message I have to give you. Have you been avoiding scheduling your annual PAP? Because I'm getting this feeling that you have and you need to. And they're like, that's a trip. Like, I do have to do that. Versus, like, my friend was a completely different experience. So we were hanging out and he really wanted to date this girl. And I was like, damn, bro, good luck. And then we left. And I was driving home, and then I rarely get these experiences where it feels like someone's yelling in my ear, and also I'm seeing something and it looks like transparent, almost like a watermark, but IRL. So it feels like someone's yelling in my ear, and I see this transparent watermark looking thing as I'm driving. So it's not, like, blocking my vision to where I can't see the car in front of me, but it's, like, light enough to where it's floating and I can see it. And I see, like, this specific red candle from the Botanica, and they're like, get your friend this candle, tell him to burn it. And our friend is in the military, like, pretty high up there, to where it's like, this guy's gonna think I'm tripping. Also, this was, like, years ago. Like, when I first started my practice, I was like, he's gonna think I'm a Looney Tune and he's not gonna want to be my friend anymore. And it was like, do it. It was like yelling at me to do it. So then I said, okay, fine, just to make the voices shut up. I went to the Botanica, got him the candle, and he lived close by. And I called him and I was like, hey, you're not going to believe this, but I got a message for you. And this time I wasn't trying to, like, channel it. We weren't doing a session. We were just hanging out, and just this download happened. So then I gave him the candle and I was like, you know, if you want to burn it, cool. If not, whatever. And he's like, well, I really want to date this girl, so what do I have to lose? So he burned it and he wrote something on it. To this day, he hasn't told me what he wrote on it. But then...
Let's call him right now.
I know, right? So then he burned it. He asked the girl out. The girl said yes. I was like, cool. Don't tell her that you did this because she's gonna think you're crazy, and then that relationship's not gonna last. But then on the third date, of course, he told her what happened, and it turns out that the same week, around the same time that I was telling him about this red candle, this girl went to a tarot reader, and the tarot reader said, this guy of this zodiac sign, which was his zodiac sign, is going to come into your life. I need you to burn a red candle, and when you're done burning the red candle, he's gonna ask you out. So they were burning red candles at the same time, and then she felt inspired to write something on the candle, and it was exactly what he was inspired to write on the candle.
I didn't know that part.
And they both burnt it in their bathtub, which is really freaky.
But safe.
But safe, yes. So that relationship kind of did last for like a little bit.
They did it. That was a horrible relationship.
It was a horrible relationship, but it did happen.
This is what happens when you meddle in people's relationships.
They're no longer together. Hey, I just had, you know what? He learned a lot of lessons from there, so I don't feel bad. Plus, he really wanted it.
Has he learned them though?
He has learned his lessons.
Okay.
He is a better person because of this relationship. But anyway, so those are two different examples, but I don't know, like, I'm telling people they could take or leave the advice. I'm not trying to, like, impose anything on them.
This is one day where I think I'm going to have to, like, be a little hard-hitting on you.
That's okay.
Yeah, I think the delineation between speaking in tongues and saying I'm getting the message is not that much different from what you're doing. But I think I do see the predatory aspect with the speaking in tongues, whereas, like, I think with you, you're a little more, let's say, just civil with it, and you're not like pushing it on somebody.
I'm civil.
Yes.
I'm not feral with it. I guess so.
So you want to get a reading with Jen and have her speak in tongues to you?
Ew, no.
How can people get a hold of you?
Hell no. Don't call me if that's what you want. But if you want a normal reading, a civilized reading.
So if somebody wants to, for the money, I'll do anything.
You can reach out to me Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, Blue Sky at Jen Colo and JenColo.com. And if you like the show, rate it and give us 5 stars.
All right, everybody. Thank you so much for watching today's episode. And if you ever end up speaking in tongues, let us know.
Remember, the magic within you makes the world a more beautiful place. Blessed be, and signing off. Bye.